Maseches Shviis, Perek Gimel, and we're up to Maseches on page 427 of your Mishnah Behira, 427. And the Mishnah is going to continue now with malachos, things that really you can do, but mipnei maris ayin, because of concern that onlookers will believe that if you can do it, I can do it, and they'll get the wrong idea of why you're doing it. So we do not do certain things. We talked about the perek included discussion about bringing out piles of manure to your field. Can you do that in the 7th year? How do you do it? When do you do it? And the Mishnah discussed about removing stones from your field. It looks like you're getting the field ready for planting. You don't want to do that. So we had those Mishnayos. Now we're going into a similar idea of Maris Ayin. People looking on will get the wrong impression of what you're doing, and they may even take a second step. They not only will suspect that you're a Shviis violator, but they may actually copy what you're doing, thinking that it's permissible. Now, these are two different ideas. I discussed this with my good friend, Rabbi Dr. DePose, and he did research on the huge computer available halacha library. And in fact, there is a discussion about the two different reasons, what we would call maris ayin. And actually there are two words, chashad and maris ayin. And the chashad, if you remember when we were learning Hilchas Chanukah, chashad is if you have a house that has two entries, two doors into the courtyard, do you have to light a menorah at each door, because onlookers may only see one side of the house and they'll see the menorah, and on the other side of the house where there's another exit, they don't see the menorah, and they'll come to bichoshed, they'll suspect that you're not observing the mitzvah of Hanukkah. That's one concept. There's a concept called maris ayin, where people see what you're doing and they will copy you. So these are two distinct ideas, which is a subject of several halacha articles. There's chshad. Chshad means I cause someone to suspect that I'm doing an aveira. The other thing is maris ayin. Somebody watches me and thinks that if I can do it, he can do it. So they're related concept, but they're not the same. Here, the Mishnah continually speaks about maris ayin. So the next subject is on page 427 of your Mishnah Behira, Perek Gimel Mishnah Ches. Ein bonin madregas al pi hagei oyot erev Shviis misheposku hagshomen. If you take a look at picture 94 on page 427, what you have is a crack almost in a mountain, and it's a ravine. You have sort of two stones, a crack, and when it rains, the water gathers at the bottom of these two stones. What people would do is they would build steps into the ravine so they can go down with buckets, draw water, and then they can water their fields with the buckets whenever they had to. So picture 94 on page 427 is showing you rocks that are broken. At the bottom, there's an opening and water gathers there, and people build steps. So the Mishnah here tells us, Ein bonim madregos al pi hagei oyot erev Shviis misheposku hagshomen. In the 6th year, we're not talking about Shmita yet. In the 6th year, from the time rains stop in Eretz Yisrael, say after Pesach, near the summertime, and what happens is the water of the whole rainy season had collected in the ravine. And as they collected in the ravine, different farmers came with their buckets and removed water. And let's now assume that there were no steps to this ravine. For whatever reason, people did it the hard way. They climbed down the ravine and they drew water the entire rainy season. And now it's after the rainy season, it's the summer in Eretz Yisrael, and basically the bottom of the ravine is empty. The farmers have already drawn all the water out, and then somebody decides they want to build steps into this ravine in the 6th year. Let's say the summer of the 6th year, somebody decides he's going to build a stairway down into the ravine. Now, why is he building the stairway down into the ravine? There's almost no water left at the bottom of the ravine. It's all been drawn out during the rain season. So why is he building these steps? It must be he's building these steps in preparation for the 7th year. He wants to have steps to be able to go down into the ravine in the 7th year and draw water to water his field. Maris Ayin. So the Mishnah says, Ein boner madregos al pi hagei ayot erev shviis mishaposrak shomim. One is not permitted to build steps in the ravine in the 6th year once the rains have stopped. Because what you're doing, and now we're turning to page 428 in the Mishnah Behira, it looks like you're building these steps. There's only one reason. You want to have steps in the 7th year in order to be able to comfortably go down into the ravine, draw the water, and irrigate your field in Shviis, so you have a Maris Ayin problem. Aval bonahu b'Shviis misha posku akshamim. But let's say it's Shmita itself. And in Shmita, water is gathered in the ravine, and now there's very little water left in the ravine. Farmers have gone down there and they've pulled water. They may have pulled water out for drinking water. They may have pulled water out during Shmita to water their fields when it's permissible to water a field or to water a tree. And as I mentioned, we're going to eventually get to Rav Ramon Seif and the halachas of watering, which is a key area of halacha for those who have gardens, those who have growing fruit trees, flowers during Shmita. So in the 7th year, once the rain is over, the summer of the 7th year, let us say, there's no more water at the bottom of the ravine. Now someone wants to build steps in the 7th year. After the rainy season is over, there's virtually no water in the ravine, and he wants to build steps. Why can't he build the steps? What are you worried about? He's building the steps because he wants to be able to comfortably go down to the ravine in the 8th year. Okay, it's perfectly permissible to water a field in the 8th year. So, avo bonahu b'Shviis misha posrak shamim. You certainly can build a staircase down to the ravine in the 7th year once the rains have stopped, because it's obvious that the only reason he's building the staircase is to make it convenient for the 8th year, and that's fine. You can do whatever you want. I shouldn't say you can do whatever you want, but you certainly can water a field in the 8th year. If you take a look in the Mishnah Behira, picture 95, page 428, picture 95, is a person wants to build a dam. At the bottom of the ravine, he wants to build a dam so waters can't escape from the ravine. You can't do that in Shmita. This kind of dam, which is in picture 95, is he's putting stones at the edge of the ravine, and he's also putting mortar between the stones. So this dam is basically airtight. No water can leak out. You cannot build that kind of thing during Shmita. Aval osahu chayatz. next to the last line on page 428. You can make a chayetz. A chayetz is picture 96. It's the same kind of thing. You're building a dam at the base of the ravine. However, you're just putting stones there, and you are not putting mortar between the stones, which means that it's not absolutely solid. Water can still seep through, and that's permitted to be done. Now we have a little problem. Where is this farmer getting stones from? Take a look at picture 96. A farmer took stones and he put it at the base of the ravine so that the ravine would hold water. He didn't put mortar into between the rocks, so he's allowed to do that. But where's he getting the rocks? We learned several Mishnayos about Maseches Sadeyu. That you're not allowed to just pick up rocks in your field, because people looking on think that the reason you're cleaning up your field from the rocks is you're getting your field ready to plant. And you can't do that during Shmita. Again, Maris Ayin. So where is this farmer getting these rocks to build the dam in picture 96? So the Mishnah now continues, page 428. Kol Even Shuyachol lifshoit es yodoi v'litla harezu sinato. And you have the picture on page 428, picture 97. Any rock, the farmer is standing at the base of the ravine, and he wants to build a dam there, again without mortar. He wants to put up some rocks. As long as he's standing at the base of the ravine, and he can stretch out his hand and pick up rocks on the ground, he can pick up those rocks and put it at the base of the ravine without mortar. Because those people who are looking, they see what he's doing. He's using it basically for construction. Every time he picks up a rock, he puts it at the base of the ravine. He's not picking up the rocks so that he can plant under the rock. He picks up the rock. He's not moving. He's at the base of the ravine. He picks up the rock without moving. He stretches his arm, picks up the rock, puts it at the base of the ravine. Anyone that's looking knows that he's picking up rocks to put it at the base of the ravine, again without mortar. But he's not picking up rocks to be able to plant anything. You can see that clearly. So that's picture 97. Again, in the Mishnah, last line of page 428. Kol even shuyachol lifshoit es yodei v'litla. Any rock that the farmer can stretch out his hand while he's standing at the base of the ravine, and he can pick up the rock without walking around, harezu sinato. He can take that rock and put it at the base of the ravine to build a mortarless dam. But he can't walk around. If he begins walking around his field to pick up rocks, so he can put the rocks at the base of the ravine, people looking just see him picking up rocks, and he's walking around his field and picking up rocks, and they think he's picking up rocks to clean the field so that he can plant. Can't do that. But if he's standing at the base of the ravine, is not walking around, and keeps on stretching out his hand to pick up rocks and puts it at the base of the ravine, everybody looking on knows exactly what he's doing. He's building a mortarless dam, which is permitted, and he's not getting the field ready for planting. That is Mishnah Ches. Mishnah Tes. Avnei Kosev. Ba'os mikol makom. Remember, we learned earlier in the parak, when a person wants to clear rocks in his field, there are all kinds of problems. If he wants to take apart a fence, the fence has to have 10 stones, at least 10 stones. Each stone is big enough that two people have to pick it up. We talked about that halacha, and then we talked about a person that wants to open a quarry in his field, and those halachas. Now the Mishnah And when we're learning those halachas, we learn that the prohibition of opening a quarry or the prohibition of removing stones from a field are only when you're working in your own field. If Reuven owns a field and Shimon wants to come into the field and pick up rocks, he's allowed to pick up, of course, with Reuven's permission. Shimon can pick up rocks, take rocks, and take them to his house. Nobody looking on. Again, we're talking about in those days where the local people knew each other. So the local people knew this is Reuven's field, and they see Shimon in Reuven's field picking up rocks, and he leaves Reuven's field with the rocks, and he goes to his field or to his house. They know he's taking the rocks for construction purposes. So when we talked about opening quarries or picking up rocks or taking apart a fence, it was always the owner of the fence, the owner of the field wants to do it, and then there are certain limitations. But if someone else, with the permission of the owner, wants to do these things, it's perfectly permissible, because nobody looking on thinks that Shimon went into Reuven's field and picked up the rocks in Reuven's field in order to be able to plant Reuven's field. Shimon is not planting Reuven's field. What they will logically conclude is Shimon needs some rocks for construction purposes, and Reuven gave him permission to take some rocks, but there's no preparation for any planting, therefore it's permissible. Now the Mishnah is going to discuss the owner himself removing stones in his field. The issur, the prohibition to remove stones from your own field, is only when we're talking about small stones. You have small stones, and these stones interfere with planting, and you need to clear the field of these small stones. So if you're going to start picking up small stones in your own field, onlookers think that you're preparing your field for planting, prohibited. What happens if you have huge stones in your field? Big stones laying around. You want to pick up these stones. These are the kinds of stones that people usually use to build things with. Understand the reason he's picking up these stones is in order to be able to use them for construction. So there's a size of a stone that even the owner himself can pick up in his own field. So again, it's Shimon coming into Reuven's field with Reuven's permission. Shimon can pick up small stones, big stones, whatever he wants, as long as he has permission. Onlookers will not think that Shimon's preparing the field for planting Reuven's field. They understand Shimon got permission from Reuven to take all different sizes of rocks for construction purposes. The owner himself of the field, Reuven, cannot do these things. He is limited by the halachas we learned last week. However, Reuven himself in his own field, if he has massive stones in his field, these kinds of stones, we have to define massive, and that'll be this Mishnah. If he has these huge stones in his field, people looking on will not think that Reuven is removing these huge stones, which takes a lot of koiches to move. He's not moving these stones to plant anything. He's moving these stones for construction purposes, because that's what these stones are used for. So the Mishnah now says, Avnei Kosef. Kosef means a shoulder. Shoulder stones. Boos mikol makon. They can be removed from the field. Even the owner can remove shoulder stones from makon. And a kablan, a person who is known in the area as a kablan. He's a builder. So he goes into fields with permission of the owners, and he's looking for big stones. And sometimes a kablan is looking even for little stones. He needs to fill up a hole in the building. He needs little stones, big stones, medium stones. So therefore, a kablan is allowed to collect stones even from his own field. So we have two cases here. First case, Avnei Kosef, shoulder stones. They're big stones. Bo'os mikol makom. Those big stones can be collected even by the owner of the field. The owner of the field cannot collect the small stones because the small stones, it looks like he's preparing his field for planting, but the owner can take big stones out of his field. Other people who have permission from the owner can take big stones and little stones out of someone else's field. A kablan, a person who's known to be a kablan, he's a builder, mevi mikol makom. He can even go into his own field and take big stones and little stones, because since people know he's a kablan, they know that he needs the stones for some job that he's doing. So we have three cases. The owner of the field cannot collect little stones from his field because onlookers think he's preparing the field for planting, and you can't do that during Shmita. That's the owner of the field. The owner of the field, however, is allowed to remove these big shoulder stones, and we don't know how big these are yet. That's the owner. The owner cannot collect small stones, but he can take out shoulder stones. Someone else, Shimon, can come into Reuven's field with Reuven's permission and collect any stones he wants from Reuven's field. Everybody's looking on and says he's collecting it for construction purposes. I have a kablan, third case. He's known as a builder, and in this case, even in his own field, he can pick up whatever size stones he wants. There's no maris ayin. People will assume that he's collecting these stones for a job. Now, what is a shoulder stone? For case number one that we just mentioned, an owner cannot collect small stones from his field, but he can remove from his field shoulder stones. How big is a shoulder stone? Ve'elu hein avnei kosef. And this is what a shoulder stone is that an owner can remove from his field. Kol she'eina yecholel lehinoto ba'achas yad. Any stone that's so big that you can't lift it up with one hand. So you're going to have to lift it up with two hands. If you want to carry it, you're going to put it on your shoulder. Divrei Rebbe Meir. That is Rebbe Meir's sheet. Any stone that you need two hands to pick up and hold, and if you want to move around, you're going to put it on your shoulder. It's big, it's heavy. That's an avnei kosef. That size stone, an owner of his field can lift up during Shmita and remove it. No one's going to think he's removing it to plant. He's removing it for construction purposes. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Reb Meir what the definition of a shoulder stone is for the owner's field. Avnei kosef kishmom. Rabbi Yossi says the word Avnei Kosef, that phrase, Avnei Kosef, is literal, kishmam. Those two words need to be read literally. And since the Mishnah says Avnei, stones that go on the shoulder, it doesn't say Even Kosef, it doesn't say a stone, it uses the plural, stones that you put on your shoulder. So while Reb Meir said a stone, one stone that's so big you need two hands to pick it up and you would put it on your shoulder, that stone is the type of stone that an owner can remove from his field. Comes Rabbi Yossi and says the words of the Mishnah are avnei, plural, shoulder stones. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi says, Kol sheheini tolos shtayim sholosh ala kosef. If the stones that the owner wants to pick up in his own field, two or three of them, when he wants to carry these two or three stones, they are so big and heavy that he would put it on his shoulder, not one on his shoulder, two or three. In other words, whereas Reb Meir says it has to be so big that one stone you need to pick up with both your hands, then the owner can do it. Rabbi Yossi says it doesn't have to be one stone that's so heavy. According to Rabbi Meir, if you have 2 or 3 stones that need to go on your shoulder, you couldn't remove that from your field because you have 3 stones. In order to carry the 3 stones, you need 2 hands. You put them on your shoulder. Rabbi Meir says, so what? Those are small stones as far as I'm concerned. The owner can't pick them up. It's only if it's 1 stone that's so heavy that you need 2 hands and your shoulder, then Rabbi Meir says you can pick it up. Rabbi Yossi says you don't have to have 1 stone that's so heavy. Even if it's plural, you have 2 or 3 stones that you want to pick up, and these 2 or 3 stones require 2 hands. And when you put them together, they're heavy enough that you would want to put them on your shoulder. That's an avnei kasef. It's a shoulder, avnei kasef, shoulder stones. And those the owner can remove from his own field. Okay, that is Mishnah Tes. Now we're going to Mishnah Yud. Now, I believe I said this last week, we'll repeat it again. There are a lot of halachas that we're learning here. People may be saying to themselves, I'm not going to build a quarry. I'm not going to build a dam. There's no ravine in my field. There's no ravine in my garden. I don't have stones all over my field. Why am I learning these Mishnayos? So, of course, the first answer is, you're learning. It's Torah. But people want to learn Torah almanas lasos. People want to learn Torah so they can live the Torah. There's so much about living the Torah in Rav Kook's Zechron Tzaddik Levrachas Iris HaTorah. People want to live this. What we're getting out of these cases are principles. And these principles are going to be used when we learn Rav Ramon's Sefer, the halachas of what you can do during Shmita. We're getting principles. I understand that most of us don't have a ravine in our field, and most of us don't want to open a quarry during Shmita, and most of us don't want to build a dam during Shmita. But these halachas about removing stones and maris ayin, these principles are going to become very, very, very nagea lamaisa as we learn the halachas. So we need to be patient. We're learning the principles. And from the principles, we're going to go to the actual application, Lamaisa Imyat Hashem. So now we're on, we're still on page 429. If you want to take a look at the pictures, you have picture 99. Reb Meir Shita, Avnei Kasef is a stone that's so big that you would have to lift it up with 2 hands. You have picture 100, which is the picture of Rabbi Yossi. It could be 2 or 3 stones that you would have to put on your shoulder, and you can take them out of your own field. So again, there were three halachas in your own field. You can only pick up avnei kasef, shoulder stones. You can't pick up smaller stones. If you're going into someone else's field with his permission, you can pick up whatever you want. A kablan, a builder, can take whatever he wants out of his field because there's no maris ayin, nobody looking on is going to say, oh, he's getting his field ready for planting. He's not getting his field ready for planting. That's his job. He needs stones. He's a builder. Mishnah Yud on page 429. Habone goder beina uvein reshus harab. Someone is building a fence between his field, it could be his field, he has a garden, and his garden borders on the public domain. His garden comes out, or his field comes out to a public sidewalk, let us say. He wants to build a fence that separates his field garden from the public sidewalk or the public domain. So the Mishnah says, Habone goder beina uvein reshus harabim. Someone wants to build a fence to separate his property from the reshus harabim, and he wants to do this during Shmita. Mutter lahamik ad hasela. If you take a look at picture 101 on page 430, he is allowed to dig down all the way deep down until he hits rock. In other words, he can dig all the way down. In order to put his fence in securely, he can go all the way down to the bedrock. Now, usually we prohibit digging during Shmita because that is definitely Maris Ayin. Why are you digging your field during Shmita? That's like almost plowing. You're getting the field ready to plant. There is no Maris Ayin where you want to dig between your property and the public domain, because what's a person going to think? He's digging this. Take a look, for example, at picture 101. He's opening a little, the width of how much he has to open is minimal. He's opening the width, he's digging out the width enough to be able to put a fence in there. So people looking at this, and what do they think? He's trying to plant there. What is he doing? They know that that's his property line. They understand his field ends there. And they see that he's just digging a narrow area. You see, he's building a fence. That's what he's doing. The idea that he would dig so deep and in such a narrow area next to his field, which borders a public domain, the idea that he's doing it because he wants to plant is so far-fetched that it's not even Maris Ayin. So therefore, the Mishnah says, Habone gode beino vein reshus harabim muta lahamik atasela. If a person wants to build a wall between his field and the public domain, and he needs to build a foundation for it, he can dig all the way down to the bedrock. There's no Maris Ayin because the person is building a fence, as we mentioned. You can see it. Now we have a little issue, which can be a Shmita issue and a non-Shmita issue. And this is a very important set of halachas here. People who do things in the public domain are responsible to make sure that if you do something that affects the public domain, you clean up after yourself. The public domain, people think the public domain is like Hefker, right? Hefker belongs to everybody. Everybody does whatever they want, right? You open a peanut, you throw it on the floor. The public domain belongs to the public. It doesn't mean it's Hefker. The owner is the public. So now what happened here? Let's first take the Shmita problem. You have this person in Shmita, and he's digging at his property line. He's digging dirt out of the ground in order to lay a fence. Okay. Now what's he doing with the dirt? So if you take a look in your Mishnah Behira in picture 101 Aleph, he's digging the dirt, and he's making piles of the dirt in the Rishus Harabim. He's piling up the dirt in the Rishus Harabim. Now, this is better than piling up the dirt in his field. Remember at Shmita, if he starts digging for the fence and makes a pile of dirt, he shovels out the dirt to dig the fence, and he shovels the dirt into his field. Now you have a real Maris Ayin problem, because it looks like he's digging dirt because he needs it for his field. He's digging at the property line, and he's putting the dirt in the field. He's making piles in the field. This person is digging the dirt. He's digging it up because he's going to use it in his field. So during Shmita, if he wants to build this fence, he's going to dig at the property line, and he's going to make the pile of dirt in the Rishus Harabim, in the public domain, so nobody thinks that he's digging to use the dirt in his field. So picture 101 Aleph on page 430 shows you he's digging. He's making the pile in the Rishus Harabim. But the Mishnah now continues and says step 1 on page 430. Mayase ba'afa. What do you do now with the dirt that you've undug? Sovro b'rshus harabim. You make a pile of the dirt in the public domain. Do not dig the dirt and make piles in your field, because then you'll undo you'll create the problem. People will see you digging and putting dirt in your field. What does he need dirt for? He's getting ready to plant something. Dig out the dirt, prepare the ground for the fence, and pile it up in Rishus Harabim. Very nice. Now that there's so much dirt in the Rishus Harabim, picture 101 Aleph, what should he do now with the dirt? You can't leave it in the Rishus Harabim. So the Mishnah says, umasakno. And you have to now fix it. How do you fix it? That's picture 101 Bays on page 430. Now you take the dirt that you piled up in the Rishus Harabim, and now step 2, you put it into your field. So people who are looking at what you're doing, they see you digging a narrow ditch at the property line. They understand you want to put a fence there. The dirt's being piled up in the Rishus Harabim, so they know that you're not digging to have more dirt in your field. You took care of that. But now you can't leave the dirt in the Rishus Harabim. Now you put the dirt in your field. What will people understand? He's cleaning up the Rishus Harabim, because you're not allowed to leave a pile of dirt in the Rishus Harabim. So it's a 3-step process. Dig the ditch for your fence at the property line. No maris ayin, because it's at the property line, and nobody will think you're digging this narrow ditch to plant. Pile the dirt, step 2, in the Rishus Harabim, so nobody thinks you're using the dirt in your field because you're piling it in the Rishus Harabim. Step number 3, now take the dirt and put it into your field. People will understand you're now cleaning up the Rishus Harabim. But do not dig and put the dirt directly into your field. People will think you're digging the dirt in order to use the dirt in your field. So therefore you pile the Rishus Harabim, clean it up from the Rishus Harabim back into your field. Divrei Rabbi Yoshua. These are the words of Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva disagrees with Rabbi Yoshua, and he says, Kederech she'ein makalkalin b'Rishus Harabim. The same way no one's allowed to mess up, no one's allowed to damage the public domain. So people have this idea that the public domain, the same way that Reuven owns part of the public domain, I own part of the public domain, and therefore I'm a balabas too, and I can do what I want. People have this idea also in apartment buildings, in the common areas of a binyan. They think that because there are only 2 apartments on a particular floor and there's the common area, I can do whatever I want in my common area. The common area doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to everybody. It's a whole different musag. It's not the pshat that I own this piece and someone owns another piece. Everyone owns every single piece for our purposes today. So Rabbi Akiva says that the same way a person is not allowed to damage a public domain by putting a pile of dirt there, even if he's going to remove it afterwards, kach lo yisakno. He is also not allowed to repair the public domain by taking the dirt and leaving it there for a short period of time. In other words, Rabbi Akiva says, I disagree with Rabbi Yoshua altogether. Rabbi Yoshua says, pile up the dirt in the Rishus Harabim, and then immediately clean it off into your field. Rabbi Akiva says, I don't know like that. You cannot even temporarily use a public domain to pile up dirt. That's not what the public domain is. It's a public domain for human usage. You can't even temporarily use public domain to store your dirt, even if you know that you're going to remove it back into your field. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva says, you cannot take, you want to dig a fence in Shmita? Fine. Dig the dirt. Do not pile it into the Rishus Harabim and then bring it into your field. Rishus Harabim is not even a temporary private storage place. So then Rabbi Akiva says, Ma yaseh ba'afa. What should you do with the dirt then? So Rabbi Akiva says, Tzovro b'soch sadeu k'derech hamizablin. Remember, we learned the rules, the halachas early in this parak about removing manure into a field during Shmita. And we said that if you have a field that's a base of 50 by 50 amos, 2,500 amos, at a certain point of the year, you can bring out 3 piles of manure. And remember, we talked about how big each pile has to be. So if you take a look in your Mishnah Behira, on page 431, you see Rabbi Akiva Shita. Rabbi Akiva says, dig the fence, dig down to the bedrock, take the dirt, and make 3 piles of dirt in your field. The same way that you can make 3 piles of manure in the field, the same way you can take the dirt that you're removing from building the fence and put it in your field. I don't want you, Rabbi Akiva says, to remove dirt, put it in the public domain, and then later remove it from the public domain and put it in your field. The public domain is not even there for your own temporary personal usage. You dig the field, you dig the ditch for your fence, and you begin making piles of dirt in your field. But people think I'm putting the dirt in my field to plant. Make 3 piles, the same way you did with the manure, in the amount of that we measured for the manure, but do not use public domain even temporarily to store your dirt. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. We mentioned this several times, with rare exception where Rabbi Akiva has a disagreement with another Tana. The halacha will be like Rabbi Akiva. If there's a disagreement with Rabbi Akiva and several other Tanoim, then we follow the Achri Rab Lahadis generally. So here we have Machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, and this is an important thing just to become sensitive to the public domain, the common area in a building. It's not a hefgeveld. You don't do whatever you want there. Even, I want to store in the public domain some of my garbage, and I'll take out the garbage in an hour. Okay. So Rabbi Akiva says that's inappropriate. How inappropriate is it? What can you do in a public domain? We'll leave that for now. Maybe we'll take a look at it, tomorrow, or the next time we learn Shviis. What exactly can you do in the public domain? So as an example, a person lives in a public, he lives in a building, an apartment building, and his garbage can is full. He takes out the bag and he puts it next to the door outside his dira, and in half an hour he's going outside to do shopping. When he goes down, he's going to take the garbage down with him. Can you leave your garbage bag in the public domain and you'll remove it later? Right. Questions that come up. So these questions do come up, and maybe we'll take a look at what you can do in a public domain. The last 3 words of the Mishnah. This is not talking about Shmita. This is talking about any time. The first year, the second year, the third year, anytime. The Machlokas Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Akiva applies as well. If somebody digs a bore, which is a round pit, or a shiach, which is a long, narrow pit, does this apply to household goods left in the stairwell as well? Yes, it can apply as well. And there are a lot of shilas about this. Maybe we'll take a look at the Shulchan Aruch about how careful people have to be about the public domain. It's not a hefka place. And the same rule applies. The Machlokes Rebbe Yoshua. Yoshua says you can temporarily put things in the Rishus Harabim if you're going to clean it up very quickly. And Rabbi Akiva says nothing doing. You can't do that. That same Machlokes, which deals with Shmita, do you pile the dirt that you're digging for the fence in the public domain, or do you make 3 piles in your field like Rabbi Akiva? That same Machlokes applies generally for a person who at any time wants to dig a round pit, a bar, a shiach, which is a long, narrow pit, or ma'ara. Ma'ara is, they define it in English as like a vault. It's a pit covered with some kind of roof, and there's a little opening in the roof. And you want to dig one of these things next to the public domain. Okay, so you want to dig a pit, a ditch on your property, and the property is right next to the Rishus Harabim, and you want to dig out the dirt, and you want to dig it into the Rishus Harabim. You want to put the dirt in the Rishus Harabim, and then later you'll remove the dirt. So according to Rebbe Yeshua, you're allowed to make one of these ditches in your property, shovel the dirt into the public domain, but then he's responsible to clean up the public domain from the dirt he put there. According to Rabbi Akiva, nothing doing. You want to dig a ditch in your property near the property line. You cannot dump any of that dirt in the public domain, even for a very short time. You must take the dirt and shovel it into your own private property. Okay, so that is Perek Gimel. And Me'at Hashem, maybe we'll take a look at this private public domain. What can you do in public domain? Maybe we'll take a look at that briefly. And now, Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we'll begin Perek Dalet. And that will bring us to part of the discussion of this topic of Ovrei Aveira. We saw it a bit at the beginning of Perek Gimel. Now we're going to see it again in Perek Dalet. There were people who simply did not keep Shmita. It's a very difficult mitzvah. It's a whole year of not working your field. And when the culture was one of agriculture, it's basically stopping your parnasa for a year and putting your full emunah and bitachon in the Rabbeinu Shalom. And it was very difficult for a lot of people. And there were what the Mishnah calls Ovrei Aveira, people who didn't keep Shmita. And that's why Chazal had to institute all kinds of rabbinic prohibitions, and we'll learn more about that. And that'll be a subject that will come up, B'li Neder, tomorrow in Perek Dalet Mishnah Aleph.